This week I was stepping over a baby gate, and many people can fall down the stairs. I fell up the stairs as I stepped over the baby gate and hyperextended my toe. So my wife asked me this morning, she said, she knew that we're in the parable series. She said, are you going to be preaching about the parable of the lame man? I said, no. I had already written my message when I hurt my toe, so we are not going to be using that parable this morning. We're actually going to be focusing on one of my favorite parables, a parable that you probably know well. However, I believe that most of us have accepted the surface level of this parable. We haven't really dug deep. We just take it for what it is, and if we're not careful, we just accept the Western idea that Jesus is talking about money, and he's using money as an illustration. But we need to go deeper than what he uses as a metaphor. So I've got a rather lengthy parable that I'm going to read. It's Matthew chapter 25, if you want to turn there. The parable of the talents. And after I read through the parable, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you 3 interpretations. I'll begin reading in verse 14. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded them, and he made 5 talents more. So he also, who had the 2 talents, made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Verse 19, now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Verse 22. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is the word of the Lord. I read that parable, and I'm a little bothered by the end. I don't know about you. It's scary that this guy doesn't do what his master expects, and he is thrown into outer darkness, a place with weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, on its surface, and this is what I'm afraid most Christians have, is a surface level understanding of this parable. On its surface, we have here a parable about stewardship, using the talents. And there's a word play here because a talent then meant about 15 to 20 years worth of wages. So it's a lot of money. A lot of money. I don't know how much money you've made over the last 15 to 20 years, but if someone were to give you a lump sum of 15 to 20 years of income and say, be a good steward of it, I think we'd all feel pretty honored, responsible, One of them receives 1 talent, one of them receives 2, and one of them receives 5 talents. So 75 to 100 years worth of income. It's a fortune. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the 3 interpretations that are common, and then I want to really dig down on what the Bible is actually saying here and what Jesus really wants to imply. First, we have the Western interpretation, and that is, well, we should just be a good steward with money and resources, and that is true. You should be a good steward. I hope this morning that you do your best to be a good steward of every resource you have, whether it's your home, your money, your income, your health, your toe that doesn't hurt right now, the things that God has blessed you with that you can use to bring honor and glory to Him. And that's why this parable has really become a favorite amongst capitalists, especially Americans. We're like, yeah, you're supposed to earn, you're supposed to make more, you're supposed to do more. But money is not the point of this parable. There's something deeper at play here. And as a matter of fact, Jesus was speaking to a crowd who most of them, they had a zero-sum understanding of wealth. And so when he begins to talk about how one of them turned 5 talents into 5 more, they understood wealth to be that there could never be wealth created. There was just this finite amount of resources, because most of them were farmers, finite amount of money, finite amount of everything. It's kind of like, you ever seen that meme? Only foolish modern man would think by moving the clock we could add an hour of time to our day, right? Well, most of these Eastern people would say, no, there's only a certain amount of wealth, and if somebody doubles their money, it's because they've exploited someone else. So when Jesus delivers this parable, and he begins talking about how the first man doubled his money, the second man doubled his money, and a lot of money at that, they expect Jesus to make those men out to be the villains. Because in their society, we talked about it last week. What do you do to protect money? We talked about the pearl of great price, but also the hidden treasure. What did you do to hide money? You dug it and put it in the ground. So when Jesus says that one of them took this talent and buried it in the ground, they don't think that's wasteful. We do, because we have a Western mindset. And when we have money, what do we want to do? We want to put it in the stock market and double it, baby. Triple it, quadruple it. And if you haven't kept up with the stocks, man, you're left behind, and now your money isn't as valuable. Why? Because unlike those Eastern people, we've decided we will print money. And as a result today, your dollar does not go as far. So when they heard this parable, they didn't immediately think, yeah, let's go double our money. They thought, no, the wise man was actually the guy who buried it. But Jesus turns that on its head. And so though we're using a parable that talks about money, if we aren't careful, we will just stay on the surface and say, Jesus wants me to be a good steward of my money. Now listen, he does, but that's not the point of this parable. That's not what he's saying here. And Jesus in no way is saying that if you double your money, you're going to be happy. Story after story he shares where money can't make you happy. That's not the point here. So I want us to take a deeper look and go to the real treasure that's hidden here. So the surface level is, hey, just be a good steward. Now, on that note, I do want you to be a good steward. I think it's important that we as a church are good stewards. We have a meeting with our elders tomorrow, and last week we prepared financial reports to send to them so they could look over them, because we want to always be a good steward of our facility, of our finances. But Jesus is ultimately more interested in what we're going to do with what the money represents in this story. So let's take a deeper look. A few hundred years later, many of the church fathers determined that this parable did not mean just be good with your money. They said it had to have a deeper meaning, and they emphasized that there was certainly an element of the gifts here. And so the spiritual interpretation of this passage is believers should steward spiritual gifts to grow the kingdom, and that is true. This word talent is kind of doing double work here. Use your talents, use your gifts. I would argue this is closer to the truth of this passage. But I actually believe there's even more to be unearthed here because of the context in which Jesus delivered it. Now, it's true. We are to be good stewards, not just of our finances and resources as a church. You're to be good stewards, not just of your money and your time as an individual. God has blessed you with gifts. God has blessed our church with gifts. God has given some of you the gift of hospitality. Some of you have the gift of wisdom, of teaching, of discerning the spirits, of all these different types of gifts. And we're to use them to grow the kingdom. And so I want you to hear me. Be a good steward. I want you to hear me. Grow the kingdom with your gifts. But I believe there's a deeper interpretation here, and the biblical interpretation is that believers serve a different kind of master. This master is nothing like what they were used to. In this story, what they expected was the master leaves, he comes back, he congratulates them. But that's not all that happens. He comes back and he says, enter into the joy of your master. This is foreign language to them. These are common slaves in this story. They don't spend time with their master, much less be elevated and praised and enjoy his joy. No, he's the owner. They've just done what they're supposed to do. And so Jesus is sharing with them that in the kingdom of God, there is a different type of master. There is a different type of serving. There is a different type of even slavery. We are slaves to Christ. We don't like that language, but hear me. We are bound to him because we've been freed from the bondage of sin. And in some ways, this parable is a critique of the system they were living in. The common idea in Roman times was bury your treasure. Bring it back. It'll be safe. People own things, and they exploit you, and that's just the way that it is. But Jesus turns all of that on its head. And Jesus is in no way making out that through this parable that productivity is the point. Jesus is not elevating productivity. He's using this to point us to something deeper. And really, this is a critique of the religious system that they were living in. What does that final servant say? He says, I feared, I was afraid, I knew you to be a hard man, I was afraid. This was the basis of every religious system and still is the basis of every religious system known to man, fear. And Jesus says this master wants a different relationship with his servants. He wants them to enter into his joy. And so a couple things we need to do. We need to work out this last paragraph. When the master confronts the servant, he says, oh, you thought you knew me? If you knew me, you should have done that. And his point is, you don't know me. You think you know me, but you don't know me. And by the way, this is still how many people treat God. Oh, God's just an angry God. You think you know him, but you don't know him. You've heard about him, but you don't know him. You have ideas about him that have been shaped and influenced by sources other than him and what he's offered you and what he's done for you. It's interesting. The master here gives away 15 to 20 years worth of income at multiple levels. One guy gets 1 talent, one guy gets 2, one guy gets 5. The master was generous to each of these servants. Was it that the servant who received 1 talent was jealous he didn't get 2 or 5? I don't know. But somewhere he decided, I'm not going to do this. And here's what I want you to understand. Before Jesus gives the end of this story away, this man would have been considered a rebellious and yet honorable man to most storytellers 2,000 years ago, because he was standing against the system of oppression and exploitation. But Jesus isn't just critiquing that system. He's pointing out that many of you here today, as they're listening to him, have the wrong relationship with God. You do everything you do because you're afraid of God, because you don't understand God, because you don't know God. And Jesus wants to point out that the Lord, he blesses. He gives these talents away, and he wants his servants to enter into his joy. But when you refuse to actually know him, refuse to acknowledge him as master, he is just, he is holy. And there is the difficulty in understanding this master, or as he points to, the Lord. So the kingdom of Jesus is not like the kingdom that they were used to. Jesus points out some differences with this parable. He points out that he is a different type of master. The Lord is not like they expect. And Jesus is going to do this over and over. In a few weeks, I'll share with you the parable of the generous master, a man who goes out of his way to make sure that everyone is hired and paid a day's wages before they go hungry. Jesus is constantly pointing out that you may have some ideas of what a good master looks like, but I'm telling you, in the kingdom, in the coming kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, there's a relationship between the master and the servant that is good and sweet and wonderful. So the first real truth that we need to carve out is we serve a different kind of master. Is he holy and righteous? Yes, he is. But he's also loving and generous, kind, good, beautiful. Our God in heaven is holy. He is righteous. And when he is tested, when his patience is tested, he has wrath. But he is a good God that has created a good world for his good creation. And he longs to redeem the relationship between you and him. The second truth I want us to dig down deep enough to find is this, and this is a biblical interpretation. Believers have been entrusted with a different kind of wealth. Wouldn't you love it if the point of this story was Jesus saying, so everybody who comes into the kingdom, you're going to get 1 talent, 2 talent, or 5 talents worth of income at the start. That's not how the kingdom works. Most of his disciples embraced poverty. They sold their businesses. Most of them were extremely poor. Paul went from being wealthy and noble to poor and in prison. So what kind of wealth is it that we are entrusted with, that we are called to handle here? What is this talent that he's talking about? Yes, I should be a good steward with my money. Yes, I've been entrusted with spiritual gifts, but I believe in the context. And context is when we look at what Jesus is actually talking about before this and after this. I believe it becomes abundantly clear what we've been entrusted with. So this is the question we have to wrestle with this morning. What have we been entrusted with? Because if we're going to walk away determined not to bury it, not to waste it, not to abuse it, not to get it dirty, not to take what God has given us that is good and waste it, we have to know what it is. So what have we been entrusted with? Is it just the money we have? Is it just the income? Is it a little deeper? Is it our spiritual gifts? It's all of these things, but I believe it's even more. And to find out, we have to read the context. So in the context, you have to go back to Matthew 23, Matthew 25. Like all of these things work together. His disciples asked him, Jesus, tell us about when you come to bring the kingdom. So everything he's telling them, the parable before this with the 10 virgins, it's about the coming of the Messiah. It's about his kingdom that is coming, his second coming. So the context is Jesus is laying out for them what it's going to look like when he comes in his glory. And what I want to do is I want you to see what he says directly after the parable we just read, and I believe you'll see what he treasures the most. Matthew 25, read verses 31 through 40 with me. When the Son of Man comes in his glory. So this is the context. I'm giving you all these parables so that you know to be ready. Because when the master came back, some of them were ready, some of them were not. When the master came back, some of those virgins were ready, some of them were not. When the master coming back is the context of this whole idea. And all his angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations. And he will separate people one from another as shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared before you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brother, you did it to me. Do you see it yet? In context, I believe the proper question is not what have we been entrusted with, but who have we been entrusted with? Be a good steward. Amen. Yes. That's surface level. Go a little deeper. Be a good steward of the spiritual gifts God has given you. Yes, there are passages about that. But in context here, Jesus is building the case that he is coming back. And he is going to bless those who blessed him. And they're going to say, when did we bless you? He says, when you did it for the least of these. Does Jesus, it's a simple question. Does Jesus value things or people? People. Does Jesus value even spiritual gifts or people? It's always been about people. And so when we read this parable and we wonder to ourselves, what talents have I been entrusted with? I would argue some of you have 5 talents worth of influence. There are people you have been entrusted with. They live with you. You're raising them. You're married to them. You work with them. You live next door to them. Now, often we want to choose which type of people God entrusts us with, don't we? Wouldn't that be wonderful if we got to choose? But in this parable, he gives 1, 5, 1, 2, and 1 according to their ability. And you know, it's funny, all of us feel like, God, I feel called to serve alongside pretty, wealthy, kind, generous people. I've learned something about people the older I've gotten. It doesn't matter how pretty they are on the outside, how put together they are, how much money they have, how much they've accomplished. Everybody has some least of these in their life, some broken places. And maybe you've come into church this morning with some broken places. And it's easy for us to read this and say, all right, I hear you, Pastor. I need to go find some least of these. Well, you need to acknowledge that often you and I are the least of these too. You cannot help the least of these until you acknowledge your least of these issues. I'll just go through the list. Have any of you ever been hungry? Yeah. Have any of you ever been thirsty? Have you ever been a stranger? Have you ever needed clothes? Have you ever been sick? Maybe you haven't been in prison, but maybe you've been in bondage. See, the more we realize that the Lord has already delivered us from these things, the more we realize we are called to help others be delivered from these things. The Lord has called our church, and each of us as individuals, to be good stewards of the relationships we've been entrusted with. Now, be careful not to get this out of order. I do not want you to leave here this morning unordered. You do not need to go out today and exhaust yourself to feed the stranger around the corner at the expense of your sons and daughters and spouses. There's an order to this. The New Testament is clear. You're to care for your family. And there's an order to how we're to do things as a church. We've given away more money this year as a church to benevolent needs in our congregation, people who have fallen on hard financial times. But that always takes place in our congregation for people who are involved and invested members of the congregation. Why? We give to community needs. We do adopt a block. We provide food. We do all these things. But the Bible also talks about looking out for those in the house first. There's an order. We're to care for the needs of our family, our church family, our community, the greater Christian community, and of course the world. But I would ask it this way. If the Lord has entrusted you and me with people, I wonder sometimes who the people on your list are that to you are the most least of these. You know what I'm saying? They're the people that you're the most tired of. They're always in need. They frustrate me. And I wonder if maybe the point of this second story that Jesus shares to back up the principles of the parable that we read is for us to see that what we sometimes don't value is the thing that Jesus uses this story of lots of money to represent. How many of us today, if somebody were saying, hey, I need some wise, good stewards. I've got 20 years worth of income. I've got 100 years worth of income. I want you to do your best to be a good steward. We'd sign up I want to be at the front of the line. And trust me, I'd love to show you how good I am with money. But the minute that Jesus says, I want you to care for my sheep, I want you to go after the least of these. I want you to help children understand the Bible. Oh, Jesus, I'm a little better than that. I'm more of a professional than that. You must have bigger plans for me. Don't you know I was at the top of my class? And the Bible says that this master, according to their ability, gave them. Can we admit that some of us sometimes wake up and we're like, man, Portsmouth, really? I thought I was better than Portsmouth. If you're new to the area, Portsmouth's great. We love it here. We don't let the high crime or the low income bother us at all. But Portsmouth is not the type of place you move to if you're trying to make a name for yourself. It's not the type of place you move to if you're looking to get famous, build lots of wealth. It's just another town with a population in decline. But it's also a city filled with Imago Dei, men and women created in God's image. We have a responsibility in this city to steward the zip code that we live in, the neighbors that we have. I know I'm laying it on thick, so I'll begin to wrap it up. The older I get, the less I value objects and things that people have given to me. And the more I reflect, especially as I've gotten older, all of my grandparents have passed away, been to more and more funerals through the years. What I tend to value most now when people pass away are not the objects that they've given me. It's often the advice that they've shared with me, the stories that they've told me, the compliments, the corrections, the moments of their life that they have offered to me. I'm thinking right now of a few saints who passed away in the last few years at our church. I'm thinking of an older gentleman who passed away 15 years ago at a church I was at years ago. And all of the blessings they gave me, more often than not, weren't that they gave me a check or money or an object or a vehicle. The investment that they made was often their time, their wisdom. So I would ask it this way. I hope you're not satisfied with a surface level takeaway from this parable. But if you are, if you're just, well, I'm going to go away and I'm going to be a better steward with my money, do that. Absolutely. I believe Christians, by the way, should be the most responsible with their money. Because the more responsible we are, the more able we are to be generous. Some of you right now would love to bless someone financially, but you've made so many poor decisions with your finances, you can't afford to do the things you'd like to. And so what we tend to do is we tell ourselves, well, if I were a millionaire, I'd be generous. if I had what they had, I'd be generous. And it's a lie that we tell ourselves. The truth is you would be as generous as you are right now. Hear me. This isn't going to feel good, but you need to hear it. If I am irresponsible with $5, I would more than likely be irresponsible with $5 million. Now, I know there's a line. We've got to get above treading water. And for many of us, that's the issue. If I could just get to where my bills are paid and there's food on the table, I understand that completely. I do. But I would argue that most of us watching online or in the room right now, we have the ability to be financially a blessing to someone. You can. You have enough money to be generous right now. Oh, but I really wish I could give away $1 million. Okay, start with 10. Work your way up to giving someone $1,000 who's in need before you just keep dreaming about what you can't do. And I believe this is the lie that robs most of us of generosity. I'll be generous when I can be really generous. Why not be generous when you can be generous? Start there. But let's go deeper. I don't want you to just stay there. Let's go deeper. Yes, be good stewards. Go deeper into what the church fathers considered the actual context here. Jesus relating that his church would have numerous gifts. We're super talented. And by the way, I love how talented our church is. I love seeing you guys use your gifts. At Adopt-A-Block on the first Saturday of the month, serving the needy right here in this community. I love seeing you use your gifts to bless the children of this house. I'm jealous of the musical gifts that our worship team has. I love how they play. I wish I had rhythm. I wish I had determination to stick with the guitar or the piano. I'm not that guy. But I'm thankful for brothers and sisters who do use their gifts to bless all of us. And I feel responsible to bless brothers and sisters with the gifts God has given me. Do that. Yes, absolutely. If you haven't gone through Life Track, go through Life Track. Discover your spiritual gifts so that you can use your spiritual gifts. But let's go to what I believe is the context here. If Jesus is elevating people, because I would remind you that 2,000 years ago, people were not elevated. They were exploited. Oh, them? They're just slaves. Oh, them? Well, they're not Jews. They're Gentiles. We don't talk to them. Oh, them? They're women. They don't have any value. This is the world that Jesus was confronting. If Jesus is challenging us to be good stewards of the relationships we've been entrusted with, then I have 5 questions I would ask you before we close this portion of the service. First of all, who can you bless this week financially? Oh, Pastor Mark, do you have $5? Could you buy them a coffee? Could you give them a gift card? Start small. Who could you bless financially this week? Who do you know right now that when you think of naked, you clothed me, sick, you visited me, thirsty, you gave me drink, hungry, you gave me, like they're in need. And it would mean a lot coming from you. Second question, who can you encourage this week with a text? This isn't going to cost you anything, but you can pick people up with the words you send them. Third question, who can you support this week with your presence and attention? Now, this is more difficult than a text. This is looking them in the eye, offering them dignity, listening to them when everyone else doesn't listen to them. Who are the least of these in your life that no one else wants to listen to and you could be there? Fourth question. Who can you love this week with your actions? Now, I'll admit to you, the older we get, we certainly like blessing people financially because that's easy. There's an exchange and we're done. But to bless someone with your actions, to love them with your actions, that could be preparing a meal for them. That could be assisting them with a project at work that you are not required to assist them with. That is their job. This is my job. Could be as simple as mowing somebody's grass, washing their car, or or supporting them, doing something alongside them with your actions. There's no way they're going to get that done on their own. I'm going to help them clean that out. I'm going to help them as they prepare for the funeral for their parents, as they grieve. I'm going to come alongside them. I'm going to be their advocate as they go to the doctor because they've been numerous times and they can't seem to get what they need. Who can you love this week with your actions? Fifth and final question for us this morning. Who have you served lately among the least of these? Oh, Pastor, that's what I don't want to do. Right. And Jesus explicitly says, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Were the Lord Jesus Christ himself to barge in these back doors and interrupt me speaking and fall down and say, I'm thirsty, you would fight and scrape against everyone else in this room to offer him water. Were he to fall down in the lobby and say, I'm hungry, you would do your best to get him food faster than everyone else. And Jesus says, you don't have to wait for me to show up. I'm already there, but not as you've assumed. Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers. Not the best. Not James ruling the Jerusalem church. Not Peter preaching at Pentecost. Not Paul writing the Gospels. The least. The overlooked. The forgotten. You and I have an opportunity to be good stewards this week. May we hear from the Lord, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord.